Well, business groups are celebrating a lot of victories from this past legislative session. That includes the passage of the property tax cap, which Governor Cuomo highlighted yesterday in Westchester and on Long Island. And also now the news that the state is moving closer to issuing permits for hydrofracking. Joining me now from Rochester to discuss what all of these developments mean for the business community is Brian Sampson. He is the Executive Director of Unshackle Upstate. Brian, it is good to see you back.
Always a pleasure, Liz. Thanks for having us on.
My pleasure. So you guys are doing quite well, actually. You performed quite well. It's a good thing that you all were so pro Andrew Cuomo because it turned out well for you, don't you think?
Well, I was having some conversations yesterday with some folks, and I said this is the best session that we've seen in quite a while, probably at least a decade, where we had a very functioning government. We had a leader in the governor's mansion that had a very clear path of what he wanted to achieve. He had willing partners in the Senate. The Assembly had partners as well. So from a business community standpoint, it was very good. From a taxpayer standpoint, it was excellent. The passage of the property tax cap, I think, was a big step forward for all of us here in the state of New York. And I think if you asked people at the beginning of this year if they thought New York would have the strictest property tax cap in the country, they probably would have laughed at you. But indeed, that appears to be what we have, and we're looking forward to watching it be implemented.
Well, even the people who are big boosters, like, for example, E.J. McMahon, would say in some cases, actually, it's not a hard 2% cap, that it could go up as high as 4% or even 5% when some of those exemptions kick in. Is that something that Unshackle and other business entities are actually okay with?
Yeah, I think we're okay with it. When you look at it, you know, the bumps that we're going to see along the road here are more of effect of 2008 and 2009 in the markets and the return on the pension. I think once those things get smoothed out, we're going to see a fairly solid 2 to 2.5% cap that should go on for quite a while, as long as we now can move to the next phase of this process, which is getting the mandates taken care of, because obviously there's a lot of those out there, and they're going to have an impact on what happens in the actual long-term effect of that cap. So that's the next step in our process. Okay,
can you talk about that a little bit, though? Because I know that the mandate relief was perhaps a little bit of a dark spot on this rather bright horizon for everyone. I know that mandate relief was something that you pushed quite hard on, and other business leaders and municipal leaders, particularly upstate, pushed quite hard on, and what you ended up with really wasn't much to speak of. I mean, you're talking about maybe $130 million worth of relief when there were the Republicans pushing for as much as $250 million. That's quite a difference.
Well, sure, and I think it's, you know, when we talk about mandate relief, I always tell people, when you were little, there was always the one door in the house that your parents told you never to open because there were bad things behind that door. And really what we need to do now is open up that door and confront the boogeyman face to face, and that's the mandates that are on our local governments.
Are we talking about the basement?
Well, in the right, in the basement, in the attic, wherever that is, you know, that door has always been there. But, you know, we need to address this issue, and our organization has taken a very aggressive stance in moving mandates along. We issued earlier this year 9 very practical solutions that we think the government could implement fairly significantly and quickly, a couple of which have been introduced. We have the Unfunded Mandate Reform Act, which was introduced by Assemblyman Morelli and Senator Martins, both majority sponsorships. It gives the governor one shot a year to introduce his own mandate reform options. We've looked at responsible and, you know, low bidders on construction projects, a bill that's Senator Ranzenhofer and Assemblyman Schimminger have. So we know those options are out there, but what we have to do is get over this doomsday scenario and the sky is falling and Chicken Little is running around. Is there going to be stress on our local governments? Absolutely. But we believe with a push from the business community, the taxpayers, working with, you know, Peter Baines over at NICOM and Steve over at NISAC and Tim over at the School Boards Association, we can get these mandates taken care of, but it's going to take a concerted effort.
Okay, but Brian, I mean, if you couldn't get it done this year, when the governor is arguably at his strongest, he's the first 6 months, or when a new governor who comes in with the kind of mandate that Andrew Cuomo came in with really is able to get some change effected before he gets into year number 2, when he already has to start looking at re-election. I mean, that's just the reality. Plus, you've got a legislature that everybody is going to be up for re-election next year, and you're looking at new lines. So if you couldn't do it this year when unions really took it on the chin, how are you going to get it done when the real things we're talking about here are Taylor, are Triborough, are things that the unions are going to fight like heck to protect?
Well, I think it goes back to the argument that we've had all along. There has never been an impetus or a reason to deal with these mandates that have been on the books for decades. We know they've been an issue. They've been significant cost drivers, you know, for our local governments.
Right.
What the cap does is it does two things. One, it starts to control the growth of property taxes in New York State, which is a critical piece. The second part of that is, because of the way it was written and because of the strengths built into it, it's now going to force the mandate conversation. So at some point, whether that's next year, well, I think it is, because what we can't allow happen are things that we saw at the end of this session, where both houses passed a bill that would allow local governments to borrow, in effect, bond pension obligations.
Yeah, but the governor's
that's not
expected
what
to
we need.
veto that. The governor's aides have said he's going to reject it. Right.
And that's what we need him to do, and then we need to continue to push the cap and continue to push practical solutions to mandate relief, because there will come a point where we really have to deal with these. We think it'll probably be sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And we have to deal with them in an honest and upfront way. We can't avoid the fact that, yes, there are some special interest groups that prefer the status quo and continue to use taxpayers as an ATM. It's going to stop. It has to stop, and we'll work very aggressively. We've made a commitment to put as much time, effort, and energy into the mandate reform as we did in the tax cap, and it will get done.
Brian, let's turn to the other news of the day, which is really hydrofracking. And I know, are you, as a business leader, convinced that the Cuomo administration and DEC are moving forward in a way where they recognize that they need to balance, and they say they do recognize this, environmental protections and economic development concerns, such that the oversight that all the green enviros are calling for is not so onerous that you actually can manage to drill?
Well, we're very encouraged by the developments over the last 24 hours. And obviously, like many other groups, we're going to wait to see the whole 900-page report and all the details that are in it. But we do need to have a development of Marcellus Shale. I think we can go back to New York State's proven track record on environmental issues. We've always been very good. We've always had very tough standards. We need to continue those standards. We need to make drilling safe. But it's important for people to understand that at this point in time, New York State imports 95% of its natural gas. That makes us the fourth largest user in the country. We have an opportunity. We're sitting on an economic gold mine to not only reduce our dependency and use our own New York State developed natural gas, but also create thousands of jobs and a tremendous amount of economic development. And we can do it in an environmentally friendly way. I think that's what we're going to see when this report comes out. Will there be additional steps? Absolutely. But it's likely the right thing for New York State at this time.
Are you also convinced that 85% access of the Marcellus Shale is sufficient from a business perspective? Because that leaves some percentage there that might be very highly producing. I mean, you just don't know, right? Until you start drilling, which means you need to get a permit, which we're pretty far away from at this point. But, once you get in there and find out, oh, this isn't the area we wanted it to be, there's nothing that can be done.
Well, I think you have to look at that and see where it really ends up, and that's probably not going to be known until sometime in the future. But what we're going to do is rely on our partners, those that are experts in gas exploration and extraction. We'll look to them to continue to be the lead. We want to support them. We see this, though, as a great economic opportunity for the state of New York, one that we can't and shouldn't walk away from.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Brian Sampson, we obviously are going to be following this because it is both of these stories. The tax cap is going to take some time to realize the savings from that before taxpayers actually feel the impact. Plus, municipal governments and school districts, it'll be some time to find out as to whether they actually are going to be blowing the cap and asking for permission to do that. Plus, fracking is a very developing story, and we'll be talking about it at least for a year, if not longer, I'm pretty sure. So in the meantime, I want you to brush up on all that and have a good 4th of July.
Well, thanks, Liz. We will do that, and it's a good opportunity for New York. It's a much better position than we've been in. We're looking forward to the 2012 legislative session.
Thanks very much, Brian.